Two coworkers were hired the same month at the same company. They worked in the same department, received nearly identical performance reviews, and earned salaries that tracked within a few $1,000s of each other for over 25 years. They both had families. They both owned homes. They both contributed to retirement accounts. From the outside, their financial lives looked almost identical. At 65, one of them retired with $1.6 million in investments, a fully paid-off home, and the kind of financial freedom most people only imagine. He spends part of every winter somewhere warm. He helps his grandchildren with expenses without thinking twice about it. He never lies awake wondering if the money will last. The other man retired with $190,000 in savings. He still carries a mortgage. He works part-time at a garden center 3 days a week because Social Security alone does not cover his monthly bills. Oh, he tracks every expense. He worries constantly about what happens if something breaks, if a medical bill arrives, if an emergency appears with no margin left to absorb it. Same industry, same earning power, same number of working years, completely opposite outcomes. And here is what makes that gap so important to understand. It did not open because one man was smarter than the other. It did not open because one got lucky with investments or inherited money or stumbled into a higher-paying role. The gap opened because of decisions. Quiet, ordinary, completely unremarkable decisions that both men made during one specific decade of their lives. Decisions that felt small and reasonable at the time, decisions that compounded silently over 20 years into the difference between comfort and anxiety, between freedom and constraint, between a retirement that feels like a reward and one that feels like a sentence. Most people believe retirement outcomes are shaped at two ends of a working life. Either you started early, saved aggressively in your 20s, and let compounding do its work over 40 years, or you panicked in your 50s, realized you were behind, and tried to make up for lost time with aggressive catch-up contributions. Both of those beliefs contain some truth, but they both miss the decade where retirement is actually decided. They miss the decade where income is at its highest, or where time still has genuine power, and where the social pressure to spend is stronger than at any other point in a person's life. The decade that determines whether you retire comfortably or stressed is almost never the decade people focus on. It is your 40s. Not because the decisions you make in your 40s are harder than other decisions. Not because this decade requires unusual discipline or special financial knowledge. But because the stakes multiply in ways that are completely invisible until it is far too late to course correct. The math that governs your 40s is unlike the math of any other decade. And once you understand it, you cannot unsee it. To understand why your 40s carry such disproportionate weight, you need to understand three forces that align during this decade and only this decade. When these three forces come together, they create a window of financial leverage that no other period of your life can match. When that window is captured, it builds lasting wealth. When it is missed, it creates a mathematical deficit that almost no amount of future effort can fully close. The first force is peak earning power. For most working professionals, income reaches its highest point somewhere between the ages of 42 and 55. The raises that came steadily in your 30s slow down or stop. But the absolute dollar amount of your income is higher than it has ever been. You are bringing in more money than at any previous point in your career, and in most cases, more than you will ever earn again. This means your 40s represent the years when you have the most raw material available for building wealth. A 45-year-old earning a strong salary has the capacity to direct more dollars towards savings than they could at 35, and certainly more than they could at 25. The raw material is there. The question is entirely about where it goes. The second force is remaining compounding time. At 40 years old, you still have roughly 20 to 25 years before traditional retirement age. That is enough time for invested money to grow substantially at historical market returns. A dollar invested at 40 becomes approximately $4 by 65. That same dollar invested at 50 becomes roughly $2.50 by 65. Invested at 55, it becomes about $2. The compounding multiplier drops sharply with every passing year. Your 40s are the last decade where compounding still has real transformational power. The money you invest at 42 works dramatically harder for your retirement than the money you invest at 52. Not a little harder, dramatically harder. And no amount of increased contributions later can recreate the time that was not used. The third force is expense stabilization. By your 40s, many of the major expenses that consumed your 30s have peaked or are beginning to decline. Children are older and require less intensive daily spending. The home you stretched to afford a decade ago now fits comfortably within your income. Your professional wardrobe is established. The major furniture purchases are behind you, whilst the appliances are bought. The cars are owned. This stabilization creates something that did not exist in your 30s, when every single expense category seemed to be growing at the same time. It creates margin, actual breathing room in your monthly cash flow. The question that will define your retirement is simple. Does that margin flow into savings, or does it get absorbed by an expanded lifestyle? These three forces combine to create a decade of unusual financial leverage. A more income than you have ever had. Enough time remaining for compounding to meaningfully multiply whatever you invest, and potential margin that genuinely did not exist before. The person who recognizes this alignment and captures it builds substantial, lasting wealth. The person who misses it or ignores it faces mathematical constraints that cannot be overcome by working harder later. Let the numbers make this concrete. Consider someone who reaches 40 with $120,000 already saved in retirement accounts. They earn $115,000 annually. If they save 15% of their income consistently from age 40 through 65, investing in diversified index funds at historical average returns, they will accumulate approximately $1.4 million by retirement. Combined with Social Security, they're looking at a genuinely comfortable retirement with meaningful margin for unexpected expenses, travel, and helping family. Now consider the same person making the same income with the same starting balance. But instead of saving 15% during their 40s, they save only 5%. Maybe a home upgrade absorbed the difference. Maybe cars. Maybe the kids. At 50, retirement feels urgent, and they ramp up to 15% contributions for the remaining 15 years. Despite that effort, despite the urgency and the discipline, they accumulate approximately $800,000 by retirement. That is $600,000 less. Not because they earned less, not because they invested poorly, simply because the contributions made during the 40s had 25 years to compound, and the contributions made in the 50s only had 15. Time cannot be purchased later at any price. Now consider a third version of this same person. At 40, they have the same income and the same starting balance. But instead of saving, they expand. The house gets upgraded. The cars get upgraded. The lifestyle grows to fill the income. Retirement contributions average 2% during their 40s. At 50, the wake-up call arrives. They panic and save aggressively, redirecting 20% of income toward retirement for the next 15 years. Despite that sustained effort, they accumulate approximately $600,000 by 65. The comfortable decade cost them $800,000 in retirement wealth, and aggressive catch-up saving could not close the gap. The decade of decisions created a hole that a decade of correction simply could not fill. Now let us walk through the specific decisions that drive these outcomes. These are not exotic financial choices. They are ordinary decisions that feel completely reasonable in the moment, and that almost everyone around you is making as well. That is precisely what makes them dangerous. The first decision involves housing. Your 40s almost always bring some version of an urge to upgrade your living situation. The children are bigger and need more space. You have been working hard for 20 years and want a home that reflects what you have built. The mortgage payments feel manageable given your income. And this housing decision might be the single most consequential financial choice of your entire life, and almost nobody who makes it understands the true cost at the time they make it. Think about what upgrading from a $380,000 home to a $650,000 home actually means. The monthly housing cost increases by roughly $1,700 to $2,100. When most people look at that number and think about whether they can afford the payment, what they do not think about is what happens to that $1,700 per month over the next 25 years if it goes into retirement accounts instead of a bigger mortgage. That monthly difference, invested and compounded over a quarter century, grows to somewhere between $900,000 and $1.3 million in retirement wealth. The house upgrade does not cost $270,000 in additional real estate value. It costs over $1 million in retirement money. Most people making this decision have no idea they are making a retirement decision at all. They think they are making a real estate decision. They are not. The family that stays in the modest home and invests the difference does not live a worse life in their 40s. But they create options in retirement that the upgrading family never gets to have. The second decision involves vehicles. In your 40s, car purchases tend to escalate. The practical sedan gets replaced by something more premium. The reliable crossover gets traded in for something that signals success. There is nothing wrong with wanting a nicer car. The problem is the cost that almost nobody calculates honestly. Or running two $48,000 vehicles instead of two $27,000 vehicles means roughly $42,000 more in auto debt, significantly higher insurance premiums, and more expensive maintenance cycles every time service is needed. Over a decade of vehicle ownership and replacement, that premium costs somewhere between $200,000 and $400,000 in retirement wealth, depending on how often vehicles are replaced. The car you are driving in your 40s is one of the most expensive status signals you will ever buy. It just does not look that way when you are standing on the lot signing the paperwork. The third decision involves your children's education. This is the most emotionally loaded decision on the list, and it is the one where the least honest thinking tends to happen. Your 40s include the most expensive child-rearing years. Teenagers need activities, tutoring, insurance, and eventually, college. Many families take on parent loans exceeding $80,000 to $120,000 to send children to prestigious universities. Others stop retirement contributions entirely during the college years, telling themselves they will catch up afterward. The children who benefit from these sacrifices graduate into careers with 40 years of peak earning ahead of them. The parents who made the sacrifice enter their 50s with depleted accounts, are 15 years until retirement, and almost no runway left to recover. The families who navigate this well are the ones willing to have uncomfortable conversations. They tell their children that state universities and merit scholarships are the path. They expect their children to work, to take modest loans of their own, and to contribute. They maintain retirement contributions even when college bills create pressure to stop. That is not a failure to invest in your children, and that is protecting two generations at once. The fourth decision involves career risk tolerance. Your 40s represent the last real window for meaningful income acceleration. By 50, hiring discrimination quietly begins affecting opportunities. The chance to pursue a senior role somewhere new, to move into an industry where your experience commands a premium, to take a calculated risk on something with real upside, those windows start to close. And yet most people become significantly more risk-averse in their 40s, precisely when strategic risk carries the best potential return. They have built seniority and comfort at their current employer. The thought of starting over feels threatening. The stability feels earned. But the income difference between staying comfortable at a salary ceiling and pursuing growth can exceed $35,000 to $50,000 per year. Over 10 years, that is $300,000 to $500,000 in additional earnings before compounding is even considered. Comfort at 43 is expensive. The cost shows up at 65. The fifth decision is the quietest one and arguably the most powerful. It is the decision about lifestyle inflation. Your 40s bring enormous social pressure to display success. Colleagues take elaborate international vacations. Neighbors renovate their kitchens and bathrooms. Friends purchase boats, lake houses, and vacation properties. Every increment of income growth seems to come with an expectation that the lifestyle will grow to match it. Some families resist this pressure. They maintain roughly the same lifestyle they had in their late 30s, even as income grows. They look modest compared to their peer group. They drive ordinary cars. Their kitchen has not been updated. They vacation at places people have actually heard of. And they quietly accumulate wealth that their peers never will. The families who expand to match their social environment absorb every dollar of income growth into visible consumption. They feel financially normal. They look financially successful. And they are drifting, one reasonable decision at a time, toward a retirement that will look nothing like what they imagined. Let me tell you about Marcus and Diane. At 40, they look like a financial success story, and combined income of $170,000, retirement savings of $195,000, 2 children, ages 13 and 10, a home worth $340,000 with a manageable mortgage. Marcus had been pushing to upgrade their house for 2 years. A newer development nearby had exactly what he wanted. The asking price was $610,000. Diane had some hesitation, but eventually agreed. It felt like the right time. They had earned it. The mortgage increase pushed their monthly housing cost up by $1,650. To manage the budget, they reduced their retirement contributions from 14% of income down to 6%. It was temporary, they told themselves. Things would stabilize and they would increase contributions again. 2 years later, Marcus's car was aging. Rather than repair it, they decided to upgrade. A newer SUV added $680 to their monthly expenses. Diane's car was replaced a year after that. The children's high school years brought private sports coaching, standardized test preparation, and multiple college visits across the country. When their daughter was accepted to a university she loved, Marcus and Diane took on a parent loan rather than ask her to consider a more affordable option. They told themselves it was an investment in her future. Throughout their 40s, Marcus and Diane never once felt irresponsible. Every single individual decision was reasonable. Everyone had a logical justification. Everyone felt normal compared to what their friends and neighbors were doing. By 50, their retirement accounts held $255,000. After 10 full years of contributions and a decade of market growth, they were only $60,000 ahead of where they had started. The math was quietly terrible, and neither of them had looked at it honestly. The children were finally independent. Marcus and Diane committed to making up for lost time. They maxed out contributions. They were disciplined. By 65, they had accumulated $710,000. It felt significant until they ran actual retirement projections. At their spending level, they would likely exhaust that money by age 81. They would need to sell the house, dramatically reduce their standard of living, and/or keep working well into their 70s. Their comfortable 40s had built an anxious old age. Now, let me tell you about Kevin and Sandra. At 40, they looked remarkably similar to Marcus and Diane. Combined income of $160,000. Retirement savings of $175,000. 2 children, ages 12 and 9. Kevin suggested upgrading their home early in their 40s. Sandra pushed back hard. She had spent an evening doing the actual math, looking at what the monthly difference would mean compounded over 25 years. She showed Kevin the numbers. They were quiet for a long time after that. They agreed to stay in their current home. The decision felt like a sacrifice in the first few months. Their house felt small compared to what some of their colleagues were buying. Kevin's car was replaced when it needed to be replaced. On with a certified pre-owned vehicle that was 3 years old and mechanically solid. When college approached for their first child, Kevin and Sandra sat down with both kids and had honest conversations about costs. Both children attended state universities. Both received partial merit scholarships. Both worked part-time during school and took modest loans in their own names. Kevin and Sandra maintained their retirement contributions every single year throughout their 40s, even when it felt tight, even when friends were funding private universities with borrowed money, even when the social pressure was real. They looked modest. Their neighborhood was not impressive. Their cars were unremarkable. Their vacations were normal. By 50, their retirement accounts held $620,000. The combination of consistent contributions and market returns had more than tripled their balance in 10 years. By 65, Kevin and Sandra had accumulated $1.72 million. Their home was fully paid off. They retired completely and without hesitation. They travel. They help their children with down payments on homes. An unexpected expense is an inconvenience, not a crisis. They never worry about running out of money. The mathematical difference between these two families was not created by different incomes. Kevin and Sandra actually earned slightly less. It was not created by superior investment skill. Both families invested in similar ways. It was created entirely by different decisions during their 40s. Decisions about a house, decisions about cars, decisions about education, decisions about whether to fund the present or the future. And here is what research consistently shows about those decisions. During their 40s, both couples reported similar levels of day-to-day satisfaction with their lives. Odd lifestyle upgrades deliver a genuine happiness boost. But that boost fades within 18 to 24 months as the new normal becomes ordinary. Marcus and Diane's upgraded house was exciting for about a year and a half before it simply became home. Kevin and Sandra's modest house was their home the whole time. The difference was not in how much either couple enjoyed their 40s. The difference was entirely in what those 40s built. Now, let me give you specific guidance based on where you are right now. If you are in your 20s or early 30s, you have something genuinely valuable. You have foresight. You now understand that your 40s will arrive with enormous pressure to expand your lifestyle at exactly the moment when your income makes expansion feel possible and justified. The habits you build now are the armor that protects you then. Does establish automatic retirement contributions and commit to never reducing them regardless of what else is happening. Define what enough looks like before your income makes excess feel normal. The financial identity you build in your 20s and 30s is the thing that either holds or breaks in your 40s. If you are entering your 40s right now, You are standing at the most important financial inflection point of your working life. The decisions you make in the next 10 years will determine your retirement more than any other decade. Stop and do an honest audit of every major expense category. Is your housing decision optimizing for lifestyle or for long-term security? Are your vehicles transportation or symbols of status? Are your retirement accounts receiving contributions before your lifestyle receives upgrades? Every yes you say to lifestyle expansion is a no you are saying to retirement security. That is not a dramatic statement. It is arithmetic. If you are in your mid to late 40s and you recognize yourself in the wrong story, hear this clearly. You still have time. Not unlimited time, but real time. Every percentage point you add to your savings rate from this point forward will meaningfully improve your outcome. Consider options that feel radical but are actually logical. Downsizing your housing now rather than waiting until retirement releases equity and reduces monthly costs simultaneously. Selling expensive vehicles and replacing them with reliable, practical ones redirects real money toward savings. Pursuing higher-paying opportunities, even when they require disruption, still has a meaningful payoff window at 47 or 48. If you are already past your 40s and looking at savings that feel insufficient, I focus entirely on what remains within your control. Delaying Social Security even 2 to 3 years dramatically increases your monthly benefit to the rest of your life. Working an additional 2 or 3 years beyond when you plan to stop has a compounding effect that most people underestimate significantly. Downsizing your housing before retirement rather than during it releases equity while you still have income to manage the transition. Every month of additional saving from this point still compounds. The game is not over. It is just playing on a shorter field. There is something underneath all of these decisions that needs to be addressed honestly, because it is the reason most people end up in the wrong story even when they know better. After 20 years of working, after building a career and raising children and meeting obligations and showing up year after year, the impulse to finally live well feels completely justified. It feels earned. The upgraded house feels like a reward for 2 decades of effort. The nicer car feels like recognition of real achievement. The expensive vacation feels like something long overdue. The feeling is understandable. The feeling is human. And the feeling is a trap. The trap is not that the impulse is wrong. The trap is in the framing. The lifestyle expansion you are seeking in your 40s provides temporary pleasure that fades within 2 years and leaves permanent financial constraint in its place. The upgraded house delivers genuine excitement for about 18 months. Then it is just where you live, while permanently reducing what you can save. The luxury car provides a real thrill for about a year. Then it is just how you get to work, while permanently limiting your options. The reward you are looking for is not found in consuming your peak earning years. It is found in converting those years into permanent freedom. The person who resists lifestyle inflation in their 40s experiences real, lasting gratification every single day of a comfortable retirement. The person who inflated their lifestyle experiences real, lasting stress every day of a constrained one. The discomfort of discipline in your 40s lasts roughly 10 years. The reward that discipline creates lasts 30 years or more. The pleasure of indulgence in your 40s lasts about 2 years. The consequence it creates lasts 30 years or more. When those two equations are placed side by side, the math is not complicated. Picture yourself at 70 years old. It is a quiet morning. You are sitting somewhere comfortable, coffee in hand, no particular obligation pressing on you. In one version of that morning, where you are thinking about which family member you want to visit this month, you are mentally planning a trip to somewhere you have always wanted to see. A surprise expense would be an inconvenience, not a catastrophe. You feel settled. You feel free. Your decisions have aged well. In the other version of that same morning, you are running calculations in your head before you have finished your first cup of coffee. Muck, you are thinking about whether this month's fixed income covers everything it needs to cover. You are worried about what happens if the car needs a significant repair. You are anxious about a future that feels narrower every year, with fewer options and less margin than you imagined. You are working in some capacity not because you want to, but because you cannot afford not to. Both of those people made their 40s decisions decades earlier. Ye both are living with everything those decisions compounded into. The outcomes are not mysterious. They are not random. They are the direct and predictable result of choices about housing, vehicles, education, career, and lifestyle that built on each other quietly over 10 years. Your 40s will end. That decade will pass whether you make intentional choices or simply let decisions happen by default. The only real question is which version of that 70-year-old morning you are building right now. Not which version you intend to build someday. Which version you are actually building with the decisions you are making today. Everything that follows will be shaped by what you do between 40 and 50. That is not a burden. It is an opportunity. And unlike most opportunities, this one arrives with a clear roadmap and enough time to use it.